The rain hit my face like tiny needles as I stood on the doorstep, my worn suitcase clutched in one trembling hand. Behind me, the door I'd walked through 1,000 times had just slammed shut, and I could still hear my daughter-in-law's voice echoing in my ears. Finally, maybe now we can actually live in our own house. I didn't turn around. What would be the point? My son hadn't said a word, not one word in my defense. He'd just stood there, eyes on the floor, while his wife packed my things and told me all the reasons I was too much of a burden to keep around. The house was too small. I used too much water. The grocery bills had gone up. Their daughter needed my room for her studies. On and on. A list of grievances she'd apparently been keeping for years, each one delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. You understand, right, Mom? That was what my son finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. We're just trying to make things work for our family. Our family. As if I wasn't family anymore, as if 32 hours of labor, 18 years of sacrifice, and a lifetime of putting him first had expired like a carton of milk. I started walking. I had no idea where I was going. The neighborhood streets blurred together, identical houses with warm lights glowing behind curtains, families sitting down to dinner, mothers who probably weren't being thrown out into the rain by the children they'd raised. My shoes were soaked through within minutes. The suitcase grew heavier with each step. I'd packed it myself just an hour ago, my daughter-in-law standing in the doorway of my room, watching with her arms crossed, as if I might try to steal the furniture. Just your personal items, she'd said. Nothing from the house. As if I wanted anything from that house. As if I hadn't bought half of it myself before my son got married and his wife decided my savings should go toward their down payment. For the family, they'd said. For everyone's security. I reached the main road and realized I'd been crying without knowing it. The rain disguised my tears, and I was grateful for that small mercy. I had a little money, enough for maybe a week in a cheap motel if I was careful. After that, I didn't know. I hadn't let myself think that far ahead. A bench appeared through the rain, one of those bus stop shelters, and I headed for it. My legs were shaking. I set down my suitcase and sat, watching the water run in rivers down the street. I'd given my son everything. After his father died when he was 12, I'd worked 2 jobs to keep him in a good school. I'd worn the same coat for 8 years so he could have new clothes, so he wouldn't be embarrassed in front of his friends. I'd skipped meals to make sure he had enough. I'd saved every penny I could for his college education. And he'd been a good boy once. Thoughtful. Kind. He used to bring me flowers he'd picked from the neighbor's garden, not knowing they were stolen, just knowing I liked them. He used to save half his dessert for me. Then he met her. I saw it happening, watched him change bit by bit. The way he started checking with her before making any decision. The way his posture changed when she entered a room, his shoulders drawing up like he was bracing for criticism. The way he stopped looking me in the eye. She's just strong-willed, he'd said once when I gently suggested that perhaps she was a bit harsh. She knows what she wants. That's good, right? After all those years of me being indecisive. I'd let it go. I'd let so many things go. The rain was getting worse. I needed to find somewhere to stay before it got dark, but I couldn't seem to make myself move. My whole body felt heavy, like I'd absorbed all the water from the sky. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was just a pile of old clothes someone had left on the sidewalk. But then, I saw the hand, pale and thin, fingers curled against the wet pavement. An old man, maybe 70 or 75, lying on his side about 20 feet from my shelter. People walked past him. A woman in a business suit stepped over his legs without breaking stride. 2 teenagers laughed about something, completely oblivious. A man in a truck slowed down, looked, then drove on. I stood up. My body protested, every joint aching, but I moved toward him anyway. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow and ragged. His clothes were damp and thin, offering no real protection from the weather. His face was deeply lined, weathered like old wood, and his lips had a faint blue tinge that terrified me. "Sir," I knelt beside him, ignoring the cold water seeping through my skirt. "Sir, can you hear me?" No response. I looked around, hoping someone would help, but the street had emptied. It was just me, this old man, and the rain. I should call an ambulance. That was the smart thing to do, but I'd seen the bills when my neighbor had called 911 last year. Thousands of dollars. If this man was homeless, lying on the street, he probably didn't have insurance. They'd stabilize him and dump him right back here. My hands were shaking as I checked his pulse. It was there, faint but steady. I made a decision. "I'm going to help you," I said, even though he couldn't hear me. Maybe I was saying it to convince myself. I managed to flag down a taxi. The driver didn't want to take us at first, looking at the old man with undisguised disgust. But I offered him $20 extra and he relented. I gave him the address of Mrs. Chen's rooming house, 3 blocks from where my son lived. I'd passed it 100 times, never thinking I'd need it. Mrs. Chen remembered me from the neighborhood. Her eyes widened when she saw me supporting the old man through her doorway, both of us dripping water all over her floor. "I need a room," I said. "Just for a few days. I can pay." She didn't ask questions, just nodded and led us to a small room on the first floor. It had a bed, a chair, and a radiator that clanked and hissed. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I got the old man onto the bed and checked him again. He was breathing better now, out of the rain, but he was still unconscious. I covered him with every blanket I could find, then went back downstairs. "Mrs. Chen, could I use your phone? I need to call a doctor." She shook her head. "Doctor costs too much. I know a nurse, retired. She helps people in the neighborhood. I can call her." The nurse arrived within an hour. She was a brisk, efficient woman named Gloria who took one look at the old man and started working. "Hypothermia," she announced. "Dehydration. Probably hasn't eaten in days." "You found him just in time." She left me with instructions and some basic supplies. I spent the rest of the night keeping watch, changing cold compresses, trying to get water between his lips when he was conscious enough to swallow. Around 3 in the morning, he opened his eyes. They were surprisingly clear, a pale blue that seemed to see right through me. "Where am I?" His voice was rough, barely audible. "You're safe," I said. "You collapsed on the street. I brought you here." He stared at me for a long moment. "Why?" The question caught me off guard. "Because you needed help." "People don't help." He said it like a fact, like gravity or rain. "Not for nothing." "I'm not asking for anything." He closed his eyes again and I thought he'd gone back to sleep. But then he spoke. So quietly I had to lean closer to hear. "What's your name?" "Grace." "Grace?" He repeated it like he was testing the word. "I'm William." Over the next 3 days, I spent almost all my money keeping us alive. I bought soup from the corner store, bread that was a day old and half price, medicine from the pharmacy. I washed William's clothes in Mrs. Chen's sink and hung them to dry on the radiator. I sat with him, talked to him, listened to him breathe. Mrs. Chen brought me tea sometimes and sat with me while I kept watch. "Your family knows you're here?" she asked on the second day. "I don't have family," I said. It was easier than explaining. She nodded like she understood. "This man, he's lucky you found him." But I was starting to think I was the lucky one. William was educated, well-spoken when he had the strength to talk. He told me about books he'd read, places he'd been. He never talked about his family, and I didn't push. I understood about painful subjects. On the 4th day, he was sitting up in bed, looking almost healthy. The colour had returned to his face and his hands were steady when he held the bowl of soup I'd brought him. "Grace," he said, "I need to tell you something." Before he could continue, there was a commotion downstairs, voices loud and insistent. I recognized one of them immediately. My son. I stood up, my heart pounding. "I'll be right back." Downstairs, my son and daughter-in-law were arguing with Mrs. Chen. My daughter-in-law looked furious, her face flushed, her voice rising. "We know she's here. The whole neighborhood knows. Embarrassing us living in some rooming house taking care of some homeless man." "I'm not embarrassing anyone," I said from the stairs. "I'm just living my life." My son turned to me, and for a moment I thought I saw relief in his eyes. But then his wife grabbed his arm, and his expression hardened. "Mum, this is ridiculous. Come home." "You threw me out." "We didn't throw you out." My daughter-in-law's voice was sugar-sweet now, the voice she used when other people were watching. "We just needed some space. We thought you'd stay with a friend for a few days, not end up in a place like this." "I don't have friends. I spent all my time taking care of your family. See," she turned to my son. "This is exactly the kind of manipulation I was talking about. Guilt trips and drama." Something inside me broke, not shattered, just quietly cracked like ice giving way. "You want to know about drama?" I kept my voice level, calm. "Drama is working yourself sick so your child can have a better life, then being told you're a burden. Drama is watching your son stand there in silence while his wife lists all the reasons you're not wanted. Drama is realizing that the person you loved most in the world values you less than an extra bedroom." My son flinched. "Mum, that's not fair." "Fair?" I almost laughed. "You want to talk about fair?" "We heard you inherited money," my daughter-in-law cut in, her eyes gleaming. "That old man upstairs, someone said he's actually rich. That you're going to get a reward or inheritance or something. We just want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of." I stared at her. "You think I helped him for money? Why else would you waste your resources on a stranger?" "Because he needed help. Because he was dying on the street and no one else cared. Because that's what decent people do." "Decent people take care of their families first," she snapped, dropping the sweet act entirely. "Not random homeless men." "I would have taken care of my family," my voice cracked. "I tried for years, but my family didn't want me." Footsteps on the stairs behind me, William's voice stronger than I'd heard it in days. "That's enough." We all turned. William stood at the top of the stairs, dressed in clean clothes, looking nothing like the man I'd found in the rain. Behind him stood two other men in expensive suits, one carrying a briefcase. "William, please." The man with the briefcase looked worried. "You should be resting." "I'm fine, James." William descended the stairs slowly with dignity. "Better than I've been in months, actually." My daughter-in-law's eyes were calculating, already trying to figure out the angle. "So I'm sorry if there's been any confusion. We're Grace's family and we're just concerned about her welfare." "Are you?" William's voice was flat. "How touching." He reached the bottom of the stairs and stood beside me. I could feel him trembling slightly, but his voice was steady. "James, please tell everyone who I am." The man with the briefcase sighed. "William Hartford, founder and majority shareholder of Hartford Industries, estimated net worth of $1.2 billion. The room went silent. My daughter-in-law's mouth opened and closed like a fish. William continued. "6 months ago, my son sued me for control of my company, claiming I was mentally unfit. My daughter testified against me. My grandchildren, whom I'd put through college, wouldn't return my calls. The board voted to remove me as chairman. I lost everything I'd built, not because I was incompetent, but because my family was greedy." He paused, his jaw tight. "So I disappeared. I wanted to see what the world looked like when you had nothing. I wanted to know if there was any kindness left, or if I'd been a fool to believe in human decency. And?" The word escaped before I could stop it. William turned to me and his eyes were bright. "I collapsed on that street, knowing that if anyone helped me, it would be because they wanted something, expecting to wake up robbed or in a hospital with a bill I'd be forced to pay. Instead, I woke up here with a woman who spent her last dollars to keep me alive. A woman who asked nothing, expected nothing, just sat with me and made sure I didn't die alone. William, He held up a hand. "Let me finish, Grace." He turned back to my son and daughter-in-law. I've been conscious longer than you think. I heard you arrive. I heard every word. My daughter-in-law's face had gone pale. Sir, Mr. Hartford, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. You threw your mother out because she was inconvenient. You showed up here because you heard money was involved. Everything Grace said about you is true. I heard it in your own words. My son finally found his voice. Mum, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. You should have loved me more than you feared her. I said it gently, because it was true, and the truth didn't need shouting. But you didn't, and that's something you'll have to live with. William gestured to the other man in a suit. Robert. Please show these people out. They're not welcome here. Now wait just a minute. My daughter-in-law's voice rose. You can't just throw us out. We're her family. We have rights. You have the right to leave quietly, or the right to be escorted out by the police. William's voice was ice. Your choice. They left. My son looked back once, his face crumpling, but his wife pulled him forward. The door closed behind them, and the silence felt like a blessing. I sat down heavily on Mrs. Chen's sofa. My hands were shaking. Grace, William sat beside me. I owe you my life. Literally. The doctors said another hour in that rain and I would have died. You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would do. But they didn't. Dozens of people saw me. Hundreds, probably. Only you stopped. He took my hand. James has been working on getting my company back. We have enough evidence of the conspiracy to nullify the board's decision. But I don't want any of it anymore. William, no. That's your life's work. My life's work taught me nothing about what matters. You did that. He squeezed my hand. I want to do something different, something better, and I want you to help me. Over the next hour, he laid out his plan. A foundation to help elderly people who'd been abandoned by their families. Housing, medical care, legal assistance. He wanted to create what he wished had existed for him, what he knew should have existed for me. I need someone who understands, he said. Someone who's lived it. Someone with a good heart who won't let power corrupt them. I need you, Grace. I thought about my old life, the tiny room in my son's house. The constant criticism, the feeling of being unwanted, unnecessary, in the way. I thought about the last 4 days, the purpose I'd felt taking care of William, the way helping someone had helped me. Yes, I said, yes, I'll do it. James, the lawyer, started pulling papers from his briefcase. We'll need to set up accounts, establish your authority, create the legal framework. Tomorrow, William said firmly. Tonight, let Grace rest. She's earned it. But I wasn't tired. For the first time in years, I felt awake. Mrs. Chen brought us tea, her eyes twinkling. I told you he was lucky, she said to me. But I think maybe you're lucky too. That night, lying in the small bed in that small room, I thought about luck. I thought about my son, who'd grown up with everything, and how he'd ended up with nothing that mattered. I thought about myself, who'd ended up with nothing, and how I'd found something precious in that emptiness. The rain had stopped. Through the window, I could see stars. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the Hartford Foundation headquarters. My office was on the top floor, overlooking the city. The walls were covered with photos of the people we'd helped, the families we'd reunited, the lives we'd saved. William was there most days, energized by the work in a way his old company had never energized him. We'd become family, the kind you choose, the kind that chooses you back. My son called sometimes. I always answered. I listened to his apologies, his regrets, his promises to do better. His wife had left him, he told me. She'd found someone with better prospects, now that he'd been cut out of the foundation's work. I'm sorry, Mom, he said every time. I'm so sorry. I know, I always replied. And I meant it. I knew he was sorry. But sorry doesn't undo what's done. Sorry doesn't give back the years of feeling small and unwanted. Sorry is just a word. But forgiveness is a practice. So I talked to him. I invited him to lunch occasionally. I let him see what I'd become, who I'd always been underneath the weight of his rejection. He was different now, alone, humbler, more thoughtful. Maybe losing everything had taught him something, the way it had taught me. On the anniversary of the day I found William, we held a gala for the foundation. The ballroom was filled with donors, supporters, the people whose lives we'd touched. I gave a speech about second chances, about finding family in unexpected places, about the day the worst thing that ever happened to me became the best thing. Afterward, William raised his glass in a toast. "To Grace," he said, "who taught an old man that kindness still exists, who saved my life in more ways than one, who proved that the worst betrayals can lead to the greatest blessings." Everyone drank. I felt tears on my cheeks and didn't bother to hide them. Later, standing by the window and looking out at the city lights, I thought about that rainy night, about the moment I decided to help a stranger when I had nothing to give, about how that single choice had changed everything. They'd thrown me out thinking I was useless, disposable, a burden they were better off without. But they were wrong. I wasn't useless. I'd never been useless. I'd just been useful to the wrong people. And now, finally, I was right where I belonged. Not because of who I'd raised or what I'd sacrificed, but because of who I was when I had nothing left to prove. The rain had washed away my old life, and in the flood, I'd found myself. That was worth everything I'd lost. Everything, and more.